Okay, demand and supply. So let's get started straight away without further ado. Now, first of all, we need to know what is supply and demand. And here's a short definition. Supply and demand levels are zones, and the key word here is zones. Supply and demand levels are zones where the market is willing to sell or buy with big volume. In other words, good support and resistance levels. Now, some people may argue, in fact, that support and resistance is not demand and supply. And that's fair enough, but I look at it the same. Demand and supply is a zone where support and resistance is pretty much a line for us. However, though, the mentality is the same, and what we need to treat here is the mentality, and the reason for that is no demand and supply zone is always going to be accurate, and you're going to have a range of prices where the market will take off. And the demand and supply, just like support and resistance is not always going to be like a one level either. So let's take a look and see it actually live. Now, this is euro dollar. As you can see, it's a daily chart here. I'm working on a MetaTrader 5 platform. Doesn't matter what you work on. And a demand and supply is going to be a zone where the market bought in volume. For example, this place is going to be a zone where if the market does ever come back here, which I presume it should do, we will be buying heavy here because you can see there was a huge volume going up. And this zone as well was for us a sell zone from here. As you can see, why? Because this is a zone where the market sold really heavy. Okay, so this was a sell zone as well. In fact, if I turn this into a weekly chart, we'll see it much better. As you know, we're following the euro dollar. If you're following my videos, you'll see that I'm following it. And this zone for us was a sell zone. Why? Because of the heavy selling. So buying and selling really depends on where they did it. Now also, although a lot of people say, you know, support and resistance is different, in my eyes, it's not that difference, because as you can see, it's pretty much the same thing. This is the level where they sold heavy. So I'm keeping an eye on this level. And this is in fact more accurate than the demand and supply. This is a supply zone here where they sold heavy. As you can see, the market did retrace a little bit, and it still should retrace a little bit more despite the fact that there is aggressive buying. Okay, so if I wanted to mark another demand level on the weekly, then it would be this bar here. Why? Because this is the resistance here. This bar is the last red bar before the breakout happened. Okay, it's called the manipulation bar, which we'll get into later on, which led to this whole thing here, market going up. Okay, so as you can see here, if I go back to the daily as well, the real difference is that it's a zone. Okay, so if I wanted to mark another zone on the daily, it would be here where they bought heavy, and another one would be also here, because this is a place where they also bought heavy, which caused a breakout of a resistance. Okay, you'd also need to look out for bars with big wicks like this, because that is also going to be, if the market does come back down, a zone we'll be looking into. As you can see, the market did that already after this level. How the market here rushed up, broke the resistance, closed above it, came back to retest it, and in that bar it goes again. So if there's a long wick, like on this bar here, on this candle bar, then this zone is going to be a demand zone. And the same thing obviously for supply levels. If I was to, for example, look at this candle here. See how the market sold heavy and broke the support. Okay, so if the market does come back into this zone, okay, we'd be looking to sell, won't we? Okay, but what happened? The market cut straight through. Okay, which is fair enough. Okay, what I'm trying to say is they won't work all the time. So we'll have to match a swing day, a swing hour, and a price, and that's the whole idea. We're working with timing. Okay, so let's get back onto our slide again. Now, we're going to be doing a lot of zone hunting, okay? But while we're doing that, there are also 4 things we need to keep in mind when studying and applying supply and demand. One is called the market structure. Now, this is very important because we'd like to have a bias in the market. And market structure really means the direction of the market. Where are we going to? What's the direction like? Where can the direction change? How will it give me a sign that it is changing? So all of this is really important, because according to the market structure and how I'm following the market structure, I'm going to decide whether I want to be a buyer or a seller. All right, so that's very important. The second thing is liquidity. Now, liquidity is the structural integrity, which basically means if a market is in a certain structure, how strong is that structure and how is it being maintained with integrity? Basically, it means locations where the market needs to come to flush out the stop losses so that there can be some liquidity, and then the big players can go into the market and trade on those levels. So a good idea is often what we see is to actually put your trade order where everybody's stop losses are. Right, so that's not a bad kind of strategy. As we go along, we'll look into this as well. This is a very, very important topic. It will also help us to place our stop losses. Now, when we're using timing, our stop losses are much, much tighter. But if you weren't using timing, you need to take this into consideration. Basically, liquidity means where the stop losses are. This is why knowing market structure, knowing the zones is very, very important. Then we have obviously where to enter the trade. We always want to buy cheap and sell expensive, which means that when we're trading supply and demand, we have to wait for a retracement to happen before we enter the trade. So understanding where these demand and supply zones are, understanding when the market structure changes is important so that we can identify a retracement entry. Okay? We always want to buy cheap, sell expensive. This is also our principle, not just with supply and demand, but with also the Global Trading Club. We're always looking to trade at levels where if we're going to sell, we want it to be high. If we're going to buy, we want it to be low. Okay? And we're also going to learn how to target. So we're going to need to know where to get out. This is also very important. When you enter any trade, you must know where you're going to get out. It's like going on a road trip. You need to know where you're going to. You can't just start driving around and then, figure it out along the way. You need to have a plan. And exit is a strategy. It is a part of the plan. So we need to bring all of these principles together, and this is why they're all on the first slide when we're doing supply and demand. So let's put it into perspective here. Supply and demand levels are zones, whereas support and resistance are specific levels that we draw. They're similar but not the same, but we use them very much together. So if there is a support resistance, you must check to see if there's a supply demand zone close by. I will explain a few more reasons as to why that is, because they will stop you out. That is true. Okay, but there are a few other things we will touch on later on. Okay, the idea is I would recommend to use them both together. In my videos you'll often see me drawing a zone and a vertical and a horizontal line as well to a specific price. Normally it's of a PST level, but if I wasn't using the PST indicator, I would still be using a horizontal line to mark a specific price that I'd like to get into. Or if the range is big, I will also teach you and show you how to do a Fibonacci zone inside the range as well. In the interim though, let's do a few examples and just figure out supply and demand, support and resistance. So when we look at the chart, we should be able to see them straight off the bat. We should get that competent in these.